What's up, guys? This is Danny.
And Tom. And we're the Real Nice Gamers.
And today we're talking about the Anthem demo. The Anthem VIP demo released with its myriad of problems. The game was plagued with issues like overloaded servers and infinite load screens, among many others. There were many who paid for early access to the game that were unable to even play during the VIP weekend.
BioWare promised to fix these issues, and thankfully, when the public demo was released, everything seemed to be resolved. Players were finally able to log in and successfully play the hotly anticipated shared world shooter.
But even though they fixed their problems, the game fucking blows.
I mean, I wouldn't say it f***ing blows. I am a little bit less excited about it after having played it, but I think there may still be some potential.
There isn't.
Well, let's look at the game piece by piece, and I'll explain what I'm getting at. Let's start with the performance.
Okay, but I go first. I played Anthem on the Xbox One X, and even on the most powerful system on the planet, the hub world runs at a very noticeably low frame rate, and I'm sure it's even worse on the base consoles.
Well, I don't really care about the hub world.
Well, the game itself doesn't fare much better. It runs pretty well most of the time, but once the screen is filled with enemies and bullets, it can really turn into a chugfest. Not the good kind of chugfest.
That's not bad at all.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. While I do think the game can be fun, I'm gonna have to be playing it on the PC. I know I'm taking the pro Anthem side here, but the console performance was honestly a deal breaker for me. I also play on the One X, but I'd describe the action as muddy epilepsy once more than half a dozen enemies hop into the fray. Now, the outlook was a lot different on the PC. My current rig is running an i7 7700K and a 1080 Ti.
Brag about it.
The frame rate kept up, and the game looked gorgeous. The load times were more tolerable as well with the solid-state drive.
Yeah, the console load times were pretty long when loading the world, but it was actually the in-world loading screens that really bothered me. They were short, but it really breaks up the immersion encountering load times in between zones.
Yeah, I understand that. It reminded me of old-school Monster Hunter games. But it's not quite that bad.
Yeah, but the in-game load screens serve as a constant reminder that you're playing a game as opposed to a more realistic, seamless world. And while this isn't something that I would say ruins the game, I have a much bigger issue when it comes to the actual gameplay. This is where the experience really falls flat on its face. Flying around and traversing the world feels pretty good, but as soon as you stop to fight the enemies, the game really starts to fall apart. To me, the combat is uninteresting at the best of times and clunky and frustrating at the worst.
Well, what do you mean?
Let me give you 3 reasons.
The meaning of the box is threefold. 1, it gives me the time to think about what I did. 2, it proves how much I care about my friendship with Joey. And 3, it hurts.
Right, threefold. There's the enemy design, the gunplay, and the abilities. Starting with the enemies, the biggest problem is they just don't seem to react in an interesting or engaging manner. They give off a feeling of ambivalence towards the player. They don't react to the player's presence, and they just sort of stand around while they're getting shot.
To an extent, I have to agree on this point. I wish the interactions with the enemies were just a bit more dynamic. For the most part, they just stand or kind of float in space and just exchange bullets with you. They don't really seem to have any sort of AI. And they don't really ask the player to do anything other than go in and out of cover to recharge shields. The gameplay feels surprisingly slow and kind of stop and pop, considering that you're basically a little Gundam. However, that could all be forgiven if it feels good to kill the hordes of not terribly interesting enemies.
Yep, but it doesn't. Let's talk about that gameplay. There's not much to say about the gunplay other than it's boring. Most encounters boil down to pointing your gun at the bad guy until enough numbers pop out and he falls over. There's no real impact to the attacks, it doesn't sound good, it doesn't look good, it just doesn't feel good. I mean, they don't even flinch when you shoot at them. Why would they when they're so spongy they may as well wear square pants? And I only played on normal. I can't imagine how bad it is on difficult or, God forbid, Grandmaster.
Alright, you're definitely making some good points. The gunplay reminds me of using a sword in Skyrim. It feels disconnected. I tend to gravitate towards games like Monster Hunter or Smash Brothers, where good hits feel nice and crunchy. However, 2 counterpoints. 1, we've only seen a small portion of the game, so maybe some of the guns we haven't gotten a chance to try yet are more tolerable. And 2, gunplay is not the whole picture here. What about the abilities?
So in theory, the abilities are pretty neat. I especially like the Storm Javelin, which was designed to deal all kinds of elemental damage. When I first dropped a lightning bolt from the sky, I thought it looked incredible. Until I used it on one of the enemies and he was all like,
Ha! Nice try, jackass. Next time, give it your A game.
you would expect a bolt of lightning to cause the enemies to go into shock or a grenade's explosion to send the enemies flying, but these hits seem to have no effect on them other than lowering their health bar. There was a moment when I had a group of enemies all lined up and ready to hit them with a giant bolt of lightning. When the hit came, it did kill a few of them and they fell over, and the others continued going about their business as if nothing happened.
Okay, I'll admit I did experience the same disappointment here. Once again, I had flashbacks to generic video game combat. Even the combo attacks, which have been getting a lot of hype, felt really lackluster. Most of the time, I wouldn't have even known that it had happened if the game didn't say combo. I mean, remember combos in Mass Effect 3? I remember. Alright, I'll offer the only defense that I can here. Maybe we haven't seen enough of the ability in combo systems. Maybe it gets better as characters get more powerful.
We can only hope. One last thing I wanted to bring up about the gameplay is the respawn system. Once a player goes down, they must wait on a revival from a fellow player. Until another teammate can pick the downed player up, that player is stuck watching a red screen. I can understand if we were playing on one of the harder difficulty levels, but for a normal activity, this is just too much. There were times when me or one of my teammates would fall in an area surrounded by enemies and gunfire. We would have to wait for what seemed like forever before the area was clear enough for a rescue.
Have you tried not sucking?
No, I hadn't considered that. Most other games have some sort of countdown clock for when the player goes down. On easier modes, it's a countdown until the players can respawn themselves, and for harder mode, a countdown until the death is considered a group wipe. This allows player on easy difficulties to get back into the action, and on the harder difficulties, incentivizes the other players to pick up their fallen comrade. At the very least, it guarantees the downed player will be back in action in some way or another once that timer expires.
True, but I think this is something that could easily be adjusted in the future. Not to mention, I did notice there was a respawn timer when I was down. It just didn't seem to do anything when it finished counting down. Maybe there's a learn to play element here. Maybe I just wasn't doing something right.
Ah, so you're saying you went down too, dick. It's true, patches could fix many of these gameplay issues, but the most worrisome part of the Anthem demo lies in some of the underlying game design decisions, which cannot be fixed with any sort of patch.
Well, why is that?
Because it seems to hit at a fundamental misunderstanding of how to make these types of games. I first encountered this issue in a mission where the last part contained a rather annoying puzzle.
Puzzles. People will be like, why is it called puzzles? That's the puzzle.
In order to bring down a shield to get the item that needed to complete the mission, the players had to set 3 giant discs around the room to the correct color and shape. The biggest problem with this is that there are 4 f***ing people who are most likely not talking to each other that all have the ability to move the discs. Even if 1 or 2 people figure out what needs to be done, one idiot can run around behind them undoing their work and making the puzzle impossible to be solved. And to seemingly compound this problem, the discs are spread out very far apart from each other. So if one player has figured out how to solve the puzzle, they will not have time to make it in between discs before the other players start messing around with the solution. And lastly, there's no indication that the right choices are being made until the puzzle is solved. No subtle noise to indicate the disc was clicked into the right place, no icon on screen to put players on the right track. Absolutely nothing happens until all 3 discs are set correctly. And that is a lot to ask with 4 players likely not communicating with each other, all trying to figure it out. Not to mention this is the perfect setup for anyone who wants to troll their fellow teammates. All they have to do is keep changing a disc forever and they can essentially force players to quit when they are on the very last step of a 15 to 20 minute mission. I mean, I got through it just with sheer luck.
Yeah, I really didn't care for that either. I flew around that room for a while trying to figure it out. I was about to look it up online When I noticed all of my teammates were flying around and randomly flipping the colors, it dawned on me that unless I was able to communicate with them, even if I had the right answer, we weren't going to get anywhere. And now that the shooting had stopped, and I had a moment to think, I also realized that I wasn't really having any fun. And I shut down the game.
And if there were any hope that this puzzle was a one-time misstep, that all went out the window with the tyrant mind. This activity requires teams to fight waves of enemies, and after they are defeated, bring orbs of light to a plate to charge it. When I first jumped into this, I managed to pick up 2 of the orbs, but the game gave me no indication of what to do with them. I was just flying around trying to figure out if there were more enemies to fight, when I noticed my teammates jumping rather angrily on the plate. Turns out, I was the asshole holding up their game. Not because I wanted to be, but because the game gave me no real indication whatsoever towards my goal. And that didn't feel too great. But even worse was later on when another player decided to grab a few orbs and just go AFK. There was absolutely no way for the 3 of us to complete the mission. We waited for a few minutes to see if he would return, but eventually we all had to quit, and all our work towards finishing the activity was lost.
Good points, and you already know I agree on this one. But I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Do you really just want to play Destiny again? It's nice to see that BioWare is at least trying to add some level of variety into the mission design. If you have to keep everything idiot-proof, it's going to make the leveling process feel really mundane, and in a game where it has already been confirmed that there won't be much endgame content, that's going to be really important. I think they're definitely going to stumble on this at first, but I honestly hope they keep working on this aspect of the game rather than throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
So BioWare did announce that in the final release, players will not be able to hold onto the orbs indefinitely. So maybe you're right to be hopeful there. But the fact that this had to go into a public demo before they figured out it was a problem, on top of the aforementioned puzzle, all point to a complete, fundamental misunderstanding of how multiplayer environments should work. This is a match-made game with strangers, and BioWare was expecting everyone to play nice? I mean, have they been on the internet lately? At this rate, I'm pretty happy letting Anthem pass me by, and I would love nothing better than to have this be the amazing game that everyone was expecting, but I definitely will not be buying this on day one, if at all. But even the train wreck that was No Man's Sky managed to make a decent game after a few extra years of development, so maybe there is hope.
Definitely going to have to agree that the day one purchase is just out of the question. In theory, this is exactly my kind of game, but in practice, I just haven't seen enough that makes me want to dive in. With a game like this, your $60 is far less valuable than your time investment. Taking the time to get into a game like this means playing less Monster Hunter, less Smash Ultimate, or less Apex Legends, and that's something I'm not willing to consider until the game is out and it's been vetted by sources that I trust. So, looks like you win this one.
Well, the game will soon be in the hands of players, and we'll be able to find out.
Guess that means you get to do the outro.
Alright, so we'd like to hear what you guys think. Let us know in the comments. Did we miss something? Should we have a reason to change our minds? If you're playing the game right now, tell us how the real thing is. Please tell us why we're wrong. And if you enjoyed this video, a like would be super appreciated. So until next time, don't stop being classy. Adios.